Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joel Hewett, and I'm a subject matter expert here at the Homeland Defense and Security Information Analysis Center, or HDIAC. We are pleased to present today's webinar, which reviews quarterly trends in DoD-related research and development related to the Homeland Defense and Homeland Security mission sets. So as we get started, the webinar chat function is enabled, so feel free to type in any questions as you go along. We'll have a question and answer session at the end, and we are especially eager to receive input from our external subject matter expert community, or anyone in attendance today, about what trends and emerging directions you have seen in R&D in this area. Equally important, we're also curious to hear what future R&D efforts might best be directed to meet the requirements of the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security. So also, please note that we are recording the webinar, and both the video webcast and a copy of the slide deck will be available online tomorrow, and a copy of the slide deck will be available at the very end of this presentation. So first, some background regarding our center. We are a Department of Defense sponsored entity, one of 3 information analysis centers, or IACs. We fall under the Defense Technical Information Center, or DTEC, and the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. So our mission is to be the go-to R&D, S&T, and RDT need leader within the Homeland Defense and Security community. We achieve this by providing timely and relevant information and superior technical solutions. In doing so, we are able to help solve the most challenging technical problems facing the government. We pursue this mission across 8 focus areas, which include alternative energy, biometrics, CBRN defense, critical infrastructure protection, or CIP, cultural studies, Homeland Defense and Security, which we'll discuss today, medical, and weapons of mass destruction. Finally, our external subject matter expert network is a critical tool in achieving this mission. Our SMEs help us provide the military and government with the most up-to-date and cutting-edge information. And if you have expertise in one of our focus areas, we encourage you to apply online or apply through email to us. So today we're going to look at 3 overall areas that we've decided are of either rising or continued importance in the Homeland Defense and Security area. Each of the 3 on the screen have multiple applications, but we also see a theme or a thread tying these together as they relate to border defense and security, both at our land borders and also at ports of entry and other hardened targets. So first, the counter-UAS mission set. So the incursion of drones, whether hobby or slightly larger, into government and military facilities is posing a major threat. This includes both consumer drones or hobby scale, and then also there's been a rising threat of either weaponized or drones that are actually carrying munitions or even potentially active weapons. Recently, there have been major drone incursions into places of great importance. Famously, there was a hobby drone that got fairly far into the White House security complex in 2015. Multiple drones incurred into the Gatwick airport in the UK in January of this year, shutting down the airport for multiple days to the tune of millions of dollars of lost income and revenue. And then perhaps most notably or memorably, in part because there's video of the event, in August of 2018, there was an assassination attempt via drone on the president of Venezuela, Maduro. So the FAA forecasts at least 6 million unit sales of small or S-UAS in the United States in 2019. And that means that by 2019 or 2020, there may be as many as 18 to 20 million small or consumer UAS systems or devices in the United States. So one estimate is held that DoD through the mid or end of 2018 has spent approximately $700 million into the counter UAS mission. But this remains a challenging task. Luckily, the fiscal 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, gives DoD the authority to test and field systems for counter UAS in order to protect U.S. bases and facilities at home and abroad. So we foresee continued interest and effort in this R&D space. So some definitions here. This is from a recent report produced by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine for the Army in particular. UAS is, of course, a broad term, and that's one of the difficulties in talking about this topic. But here, we're looking at what also may be called SUAS, really Group 1 and Group 2 in this table, the top two. So, for example, on the larger side of this realm, the BAE Silver Fox drone, it's got a wingspan of between 4 and 6 feet. It weighs around 25 pounds empty, can carry 3 liters of fuel, and at least the most recent data that we've seen has a sensor payload or maximum package of around 5 pounds. It seems that though, is only going to grow larger as the technology improves. So there are, unexpectedly or expectedly, a wide array of counter UAS systems that are either in use or under development. Black Dart is the name of DoD's classified counter drone exercise. The event itself is not classified; it's widely reported. And the last major one that they held in 2017, it was reported that they had tested a minimum of between 40 and 50 different discrete systems. So there's a lot of options out there. The traditional option set for counter UAS is kind of as you would expect. These are physically based. They either seek to disrupt, often destroy, or some of the more complicated systems are to capture drones. This goes anywhere from a good old kinetic action of firearm or missile to take down or destroy a drone. There are Skynet anti-drone shotgun shells, which have essentially preloaded a net into a standard shotgun casing. They can be very effective. They do have a limited range, and some tests have shown that a skilled marksman who's practiced with that kind of shotgun shell in particular can be very good at them, but there's a wide variability in how they deploy and come out. It's not a catch-all solution. So, of course, some of the more recent, probably since 2013 and 2014 solutions have been essentially electronic warfare. These include the Battelle Drone Defender, which was adopted fairly early on by both DoD and DHS. It's a handheld, almost rifle-shaped, rifle-looking device. And all of these systems, there's multiple types, use some combination of radio or RF jamming, and they either seek to shut down the drone's GPS or ISM connections. There are now also additional types of these devices, many of which are larger and are fixed, which either go on facilities, and increasingly there are fixed versions that are smaller and still mobile, able to be connected to trucks of medium grade size. So the most recent generation, so to speak, of counter UAS technologies, the toolbox has really expanded. One of the most promising is directed energy. High-powered laser weapons, really for close-in defeat. This has been in the works for some time. The Navy's AN-SEQ-3 laser weapon system, or LAWS, was first field tested in 2014. And it's been used to some publicity and good extent to take down even larger drones than the Class 1 or Class 2 drones that we looked at earlier. These, of course, the per shot cost is very small. Some estimates have had it under $1. Of course, these are highly capital intensive, very bulky, power hungry, limited deployment, which is why they're often most seen on major ship platforms. There's also increasing interest in electromagnetic disruption, either ultrasonic or microwave. These also seek to essentially fry or disable the electronics into a drone to capture or defeat it. There's also increasing interest we've seen, and this is really interesting to us. They're trying to tweak radar technology and software to kind of undo the problems that were first solved when radar was adopted, which was to avoid or ignore items with very small cross sections. Early radar systems would flag, say, a bird flying nearby. That's used to be not something that we were terribly interested in. Now, of course, with some of the small drones and increasingly these micro drones, which can be the size of the palm of your hand, the equation is flipped. So that's another area of large interest. Also, one interesting thing is that defeating a drone may in the end be less important than delaying it. So we've seen lots of work in trying to expand or maximize the distance at which a drone can first be detected and targeted. If a drone is simply delayed, whether that means it's purposefully confused or has its guidance systems thrown off so that it cannot approach a target, that time can be just as beneficial as having additional destruction or defeat options at your hand. So in terms of emerging threats that will also need continued R&D and research, a lot of the military R&D on C-UAS has been for detecting radio signals and for jamming the radio link, kind of like the drone defender that we talked about a moment ago. But as more consumer drones have autonomous features where breaking the radio link between the drone and the pilot or the director, that simply means that the drone is not defeated or disabled, but will follow either pre-programmed patterns. It could follow a path that's been programmed into the drone without the radio frequency connection. And increasingly, even more recently, some of these autonomous systems have automatic obstacle avoidance and kind of dynamic response to what it would perceive as threats or objects or devices coming close to it. Another issue is the rising importance of drone swarms. And increasingly, these are both small UAS, but also micro UAS. There was a fairly well-publicized demonstration that the news program 60 Minutes aired in January 2017. There was a program by the DoD Strategic Capabilities Office, which partnered with Naval Air Systems Command, and they demonstrated 100-plus small UAS. The drone was called the Perdix. They were launched from 3 F-18 Super Hornets, and they demonstrated adaptive formation flying, which means that swarms like these will not only have the ability to resist and potentially defeat some interventions, but with a larger swarm, they are attritable. And the idea is if even 90% of the small UAS are taken out, it's the ones that get through that are going to be of value. Another issue is what we would call propellerless small UAS. And this is maybe one of the most recent and more interesting things we've seen. One of the most effective counter UAS systems we've seen to date has been really rather simple. It is another drone, another consumer drone equipped with a net that it can either dangle or potentially even fire onto the offending drone target. So the videos of these are all over the internet. The defender drone will essentially fly up close to the one in contention, throw the net at it, capture it, pull it in. Unfortunately, this relies a lot on the design of almost all current consumer drones, which are propeller-based. So we've seen one design that essentially replicates the technology in the Dyson bladeless fan. So a net around that, while it might disrupt its flight path a little bit, if there's no propellers to entangle with a net, a propellerless UAS could take that blow, continue to fly. So finally, with swap concerns, even the Battelle Drone Defender and other handheld and light vehicle-based solutions remain overly powerfully heavy, cumbersome, and even fragile in a sense. They require a lot of maintenance and would not be terribly useful or successful in a battlefield environment. So now we're going to look at standoff chemical detection and or identification. So detecting the presence or even traces the presence of highly hazardous chemicals is really a major concern for the HDS community. Fentanyl, of course, which has been extremely in the news recently, and its cousins, other synthetic opioids, pose really a major threat of entry on the southern border. Fentanyl is about 100 times more potent than heroin, and in this third bullet, carfentanil, depending on its formulation, can be anywhere between 10 or 100 times as potent as fentanyl. A very, very small dose, even 2 micrograms, can be lethal in at least tests that have been done on non-humans in very, very small amounts. So fentanyl has become such an issue that has been highlighted in the most recent national security strategy of the United States as a major national threat, especially its importation through the southern border. So this is a map from a recent Drug Enforcement Administration report from a DOJ. This shows in kilograms fentanyl seizures in calendar year 2017 and the percent change or increase from the previous calendar year. And you can see all the way to the left in San Diego, 443 kilograms of fentanyl acquired or seized. Compare that to the lethality in 2 micrograms, and you can get a sense of how much of a major issue and major threat this currently is. So for standoff chemical detection, there are many techniques. Just a few are outlined here in this first bullet. Many of these are very mature, but they remain slow, they remain very expensive, hardware intensive, and the most successful of these remain very bulky. These are laboratory technologies, and they remain best suited to the laboratory. One trend that we've seen in R&D in this area has essentially put advances since 2014 in synthetic biology to good use. For example, DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, they funded an effort in particular in 2017 that developed a method in which the method was to design future synthetic proteins that themselves were engineered to bind specifically to the fentanyl molecule and then produce one of different reporter signals. This could be luminescence or other detectable things. Similarly, and this is I think a broader program, DARPA has been and is still looking to engineer improved visible stimulus reporter signals. So one issue here is that, especially with biologics like plants, while the fentanyl response can be very strong and accurate, it still can take maybe too much time. So that's work that is ongoing that we are certainly interested in. We've noticed that some of the synthetic biology work in this space has faded in prominence in the past few years. I think partly that's because there's been a realization that the time horizon needed to finish this research, take it higher up the TRL level, and get it into the field, maybe several years longer than what was initially anticipated. There was a lot of well-deserved excitement around CRISPR and its use, but we think this is going to take a little bit longer than otherwise believed. So more recently, some of the most exciting work that we have seen has focused on advancing the efficacy of photoacoustic detection and active laser interrogation. So several good examples here. In 2018, ARL funded work took photoacoustic detection from what had been done really only at a distance of several centimeters in an indoor laboratory setting, and proved it to the same accuracy and usefulness at over 41 feet outdoors. Also, a team at the University of Hawaii, funded by ONR, and this came out also in late 2018, they've used Raman plus laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, or LIBS, and they have improved the maximum detection distance to 246 meters, which is a world record currently. And this was done in a really low power efficient mode. They've reported a per shot power usage of 3 megajoules per pulse. Other work we've seen has looked at quantum cascade lasers and infrared laser pulses. I think most notably is the Silmarils project from IARPA. And I'll just note that HDIAC, we hosted a webinar similar to this several months ago, run by Christy DeWitt, who is the Silmarils program manager at IARPA. It's fascinating. It is absolutely worth a view, and it goes into much more detail than we will here. But simply, the work that a couple of prime contractors has done has created a really powerful set of technology. This detector can capture over 137 different wavelengths in 11 seconds. And at the moment, it's capturing a single image in 14 milliseconds at 9,400 frames per second. So this is really pushing the boundary of what has seemed like science fiction just years ago. I think that's one reason why she named the program Silmarils. It comes from some fantasy fiction, actually. So when they tested this effort, it was able to detect the explosive chemical PETN on a surface after it had been cleaned thoroughly with isopropanol, which is amazing. And I think that may have some of the most application to the border and port of entry defense. Anyone who's going to try and import fentanyl or any other hazardous chemical, at minimum, we can expect that they will at least try, even if in an inexpert way, to hide their traces and to wipe down at least the exterior of containers. We've heard also some work at Sandia National Laboratories where they are looking to and have done some limited testing on devices that can penetrate corrugated cardboard exteriors. So potentially, and I think this is still in early stages of development, the idea there is in the future to essentially peer into fairly porous materials like cardboard to see what's inside. So finally, our last of our 3 areas, human target activity and behavior identification. So this deals a lot with recent advances in computer vision and automatic pattern recognition. This is a very fast-moving field for a couple of reasons, but kind of like the second quotation in the next paragraph mentions, this has really and truly been a revolution in computer vision and analytical technology. This is not just incremental innovation. Starting around 2012, researchers have begun to put advanced neural networks to use in terms of image, whether still image or video, algorithmic analysis for object, person detection, identification, and increasingly behavior identification. This has been wildly successful. Way back into even the early 2000s, around 2004, 2006, they had begun to, a team at the University of Toronto and others, had begun to test human performance against neural network-enabled algorithms simply for face detection in still images. And the humans that they were using in this test were either Stanford PhD candidates or recent Stanford PhD graduates. By 2012, the DNN, the deep neural network algorithms, were significantly outperforming the humans. And the technology has really gone on from there. So this is of a material improvement to what we had previously done. Really the initial way in which face detection, which is the beginning of essentially human detection and identification, goes back to the Viola Jones method of 2001 or 2002. It was as early as 2004 when consumer digital cameras first had the little box that would float when you were taking a picture of your friends, and it would identify these faces and put them into focus. But again, as you'll see here, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, in their most recent estimation of this technology, has said that error rates have simply massively reduced, and that this is a revolution rather than an evolution in this analysis. So what we've seen this do as well, rather than just biometric or face recognition detection, this sort of algorithmic enabled research is also allowing for what you would call human activity classification. So we have work that we actually published just a few weeks ago in the most recent issue of the HDIAC journal. Researchers at Texas Tech University have demonstrated how hybrid integrated radars using Doppler and FMCW can detect vital signs of humans at short to medium distances. These are still fairly short. It's early on in the research, a distance of several meters, which is, again, higher, though, than what's currently used. It can also characterize human gaits and other activities. So with this image here, and this again is taken from our journal, what they've done here is they've used Doppler signatures using a 5.8 gigahertz hybrid radar to detect different kind of behaviors, or you would say types of walking, types of gait. So here what they did was, before these images were taken, the team had 13 subjects who did 8 different walking activities. For example, in the bottom middle, pulling a suitcase behind oneself. They had these 13 subjects do these multiple times. They then used that data set as a training set on an artificial neural network, and then tested that on a new sample set to great success. And we think most importantly here, in the upper left-hand corner, one of these behaviors is walking with a concealed rifle over a trench coat. And we think that, especially with the recent events in New Zealand and elsewhere around the United States, having some sort of surveillance video-based active shooter defeat technology that could potentially, before an incident, detect the presence of a firearm like this, we think it could be hugely beneficial to Homeland Defense, border security, and elsewhere across the United States government. So that concludes the bulk of our presentation on the webinar, but we really want your feedback. We'd like to know, what do you think about the 3 kind of trend areas that we've identified? Are you encountering these in your own work? Do you think there are other more pressing either research trends or research needs or capability gaps that are currently going on? And then we'd like to hear if there are any other emerging threats or emerging requirements that you are aware of that you think would be worthwhile HDIAC doing continued research into. So we will welcome your questions. Please feel free to type those in. And as you do, I should briefly tell you about one of our key services. So HDIAC offers a unique research support service that we call a technical inquiry, or a TI. In these, we provide up to 4 free hours of analytical, scientific, and professional research on questions that fall within one of our 8 focus areas. This service is available to academia, industry, and other government agencies. So to initiate a request, please visit hdiac.org. And I'll just simply say we field these fairly often. They have a rapid turnaround time. They are meant to be a nimble and authoritative solution. And we completed one recently, actually, on counter UAS systems and defeat devices. So we very much welcome your technical inquiries. Okay, so we have a question from Gregory Nichols. There's been some concern that bad actors could use UAS or drones to release CBRN agents in a public space, such as a stadium. Any info on research related to countering this kind of threat? Greg, that's a great question. There's no particular research that I'm aware of that directly addresses a CBRN payload, but we absolutely welcome anyone watching. If they are aware of it, please let us know. But I think Greg raises a really important point. Kind of like when we were talking about the Silver Fox drone, the payload of these devices is increasing substantially and rapidly. And not just because some of the consumer drones are becoming larger. Kind of the standard drone, consumer drone that we think of is the low-level DJI drone that uses 4 propellers. That is in many areas starting to be replaced with a different drone that has 8 propellers. And instead of kind of a lower hanging part of the fuselage, has essentially landing gear or landing stools that comes up. Makes it more aerodynamic, makes it capable of carrying a higher payload. And the risk-reward ratio of initiating some sort of CBRN attack with a drone, is it's able to carry more and more material or agent on a single one. That becomes a major threat indeed. So any other questions? We'll give it just a minute more and see, and if not, we will hope that you'll submit TIs to us. And here we go. So Peter Sama asks, what kind of counter UAS measures would be effective against such a system? Peter, that also a great question. I think a difficult question potentially to answer. I think some of what we've seen have essentially been what they have called fully integrated systems, where they are putting UAS detection, multispectral tracking and targeting combined with multiple defeat options. There's one vendor that offers a fairly recent system like this called Falcon Shield. So it is giving a single human-in-the-loop operator unified drone detection, identification. What kind of drone is it? Even potentially what make and model. And then again, maximum distance, estimated time to arrival, track, all that kind of thing. Essentially to combine all the responses into a single unit to give them different options for defeat. That could entail anything from a kinetic action to, as silly as it may sound, some people are still contending that the absolute best drone defense, even though it's very expensive, is falconry. Falcons have been shown to have quite a long effective range, and they go straight at these things and very, very delicately snatch them. And good falcons have been trained to return that device directly to law enforcement or to the military. Good question. All right. Well, with that, we thank you for your attendance very much, and we look forward to seeing you again at future webinars.